Welcome to Storytime. In my hand I have a booklet with some memories listed on it, and I'm going to read off those memories as well as swat the occasional fly. I have here a list of all of the four-wheel drive vehicles that I have owned and built and explored with, and the vehicle behind me now is my 13th. This is my story. I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and travelling to the remotest parts of the world. I've made a lot of videos about my Range Rover. It was a Suffix A. I was 21 years old. It was May, and I purchased it, and the history of that vehicle to a certain degree is already on YouTube. What I'd like to do is actually spend more time with the vehicles that came afterwards. It was, of course, the Range Rover that started and seeded my love of four-wheel driving, my love of exploring, my love of Land Rovers. And I kept that vehicle for 8 years, 8 months and 8 days. And I don't remember the exact mileage I put on it. It was 150,000 kilometers, something like that, and I did some amazing trips in that vehicle. I crashed it twice, I rebuilt it twice, I spray painted it, and then eventually realized that I needed a more reliable vehicle, a vehicle that would demand less of my time, because at that particular time I had other calls on my time. Gwyn, and I couldn't spend as much time as I once did on my vehicle. I would spend evenings, weeks and months and so much time keeping it running for the trips that I used to take it on. So I bought in November 1989 the Land Rover 110. At that time it was not called Defender. It was the 110-inch wheelbase. And in 1985 they had launched the 110 and 90, replacing the series vehicles. They of course had coil springs instead of leaf springs, and they were a huge jump forward in terms of performance, everything about them. And today we would go look back at a Land Rover Defender 110 and we would regard it as really uncomfortable, very noisy, really great overland vehicle, just a fantastic platform. But by comparison, my Range Rover was far less comfortable, far less comfortable. It was much noisier. My Land Rover 110 was wonderful. It just took off where the Range Rover left off. And we did some incredible trips in it, amazing trips. And if I look at the reliability of it, at the time I was very happy with it, because of course my Range Rover was much older, much higher mileage, and demanded a lot more of my time. The Land Rover I bought, and within 3 months the shock absorbers had it, and I got a replacement under warranty, and within 3 years I had a pinion oil seal failure, steering box oil seal failure, and the third time I just changed the shocks for Bilstein. I wasn't going to bother with their shocks anymore, and that improved the ride and everything about the vehicle fantastically. And I did 127,000 kilometers. The reason for selling that vehicle would have been in about 1997-ish, is that I had moved city. I'd moved down to Cape Town. Gwen and I had been married then for seven years. We'd spent our time in the Okavango together, a year there, and we wanted to build a house. Toyota at that time approached me. Now we had, by that stage, published at least probably 4 books, maybe 5 at that point, and I was becoming quite well known in the South African off-road scene, and Toyota, a guy by the name of Roger Houghton ran their marketing department, and he approached me and he said, we would like to give you a Land Cruiser Prado 90, and it was the first time the Prado had entered the market in South Africa. So it was Toyota's answer to the Pajero, which at that time was an exceptionally good vehicle. The Land Rover Discovery, good vehicle. And now along came the Toyota Prado 90. And in that sphere, there was, these were the giant killers. The Discovery, which is the version 1 of the Discovery, very good off-road, not great on-road when compared to the others. Pajero, fair off-road, very good on-road, very good touring machine. And Prado wasn't quite as good on-road as Pajero, but it was better off-road than Pajero, had better wheel travel, but it didn't have the off-road ability. None of them had the off-road ability of the Discovery, which was king of off-road. But the penalty was on-road, not as good as the others. Not bad off-road, but not as good as the others. And I was loaned that vehicle for a year, and at that time, Gunnar and I were building a house, and I thought, you know, sell the Land Rover. It was a hard vehicle to sell. We loved that car. And really, although we had some trouble with it, including a gearbox, which turned out that they had put the main shaft bearings in, they'd put the wrong bearings in. But the vehicle was great. It was wonderful. After that, I wanted my own vehicle, and I didn't really know what to do, and I still had a hankering for Range Rovers, as I do today. Classics. So I found, going for I thought very good price, a 5-year-old. It was a Land Rover, Range Rover V8, the 3.9. It had the early Land Rover traction control, which only worked on the rear wheels, not the front wheels, and didn't really work. And this was also early days of air suspension. And the air suspension, that vehicle off-road was remarkable. Considering how comfortable it was on the open road, it was beautifully comfortable. So I remember doing one trip in it. It was to the Richtersveld, northern part of South Africa, right up northwestern part in the Northern Cape, what I consider to be one of the most beautiful parts of South Africa, desert mountains. Tall mountains, desert, beautiful, but the ribbon of the Orange River running through it. Glorious, beautiful spot. And I went up there to take photographs with my good friend, Dirk Peters, who was a very well-known photographer, food photographer. He still lives in Cape Town. And he wanted to photograph plants on a large format camera. And he did exactly that. And we took his cameras up, and then we camped on the riverbed. And at that time, I just started my mapping business called InfoMap. We'd organised a sponsored Nissan Torano, and they were our employees.
No sunglasses, please. Take your sunglasses off.
No, you're strict, eh?
Yeah, no, it's one of those things, you know.
If you
want fame and fortune, you've got to actually handle the...
Can I just brush my hair first, please?
Oh, don't be ridiculous.
We're researching our map, our very first map, and we were the first people in South Africa to publish a scale map of that part, and that was the beginning of my mapping business. But the Range Rover worried me in that it had the air suspension. Air suspension is just no good for really rugged terrain. It's just not designed for it, and it's all controlled by computers. And it's not so much the air springs that are the problem, and if you're familiar with my channel, you know I go on and on about it. It's not so much the air springs are not suitable, they're perfectly suitable. It's the fact that they are controlled by small sensors, and those small sensors are little electric wires, and if you lose a sensor, the vehicle can be fine, and if you lose a sensor, the computer will go into crawl mode, etc., etc. You know, electronics is something that we can't fix in the bush, and therefore I just had this niggle about the vehicle. I was always a little bit worried about it. You know, so I didn't do anything with it. I did, in terms of accessorizing it, I did absolutely nothing. I just enjoyed it, and it was almost like a stopgap. So I sold it. I was offered somebody, my father's business partner, and I said I was thinking about getting rid of it, and he was very interested in getting a Range Rover, and so I sold it to him. It was, you know, I got about what I paid for it, and I didn't keep it for very long. I think less than a year. And I didn't really know what to do then. I was very much in the and I thought, you know, Discovery is actually a better option. Maybe I should try a Discovery also the V8 3.9. And I knew somebody who was selling one, and I got it at a really good price. You know, it was really good. I knew it was a good price, and he said, yeah, I just want to get rid of it. You know, it's 2 years old or whatever. And I kept that vehicle and didn't do I have very few photographs of that vehicle, very few. My lack of enthusiasm for my Discovery is indicated by this one video shot. My name is Andrew St Pierre White. It is the only piece of footage or photograph that I have of this vehicle. I didn't like it. Look, the Discovery One I still regard even to this day as being, for a beginner, an off-road beginner, it's one of the best choices you can make. It's simple, it's inexpensive to repair because it's simple. There's no electronics. You can get Land Rover parts. Never buy Land Rover parts from Land Rover unless you really want to get ripped off. There are so many companies that will make, you know, that import spare parts into all countries. Don't go to Land Rover. I know. Besides, Land Rover probably don't keep parts for those old vehicles. The point I'm making is, it's actually a great little vehicle. Fantastic off-road. But ergonomically, it's a bit of a mess. It wasn't right. And it was definitely a stopgap for me. At the time, I'd been doing a lot of research into the Mercedes Geländewagen. I liked the idea of one. And they had just released one in very small numbers in South Africa, the 290 GD. And I really liked the idea, and I remember many years before having test driven a G-Wagen. It was a 300, it was the old 300 diesel, not turbocharged, and I didn't like it at all. But that was because I was just infatuated with Land Rovers. And so I know that I drove it, and yeah, well, Land Rover's better, Land Rover's better, Land Rover, always deriding, and you know, it was fantastic. It was just a bit of a dog, but it was fantastic. I thought, how can I get hold of one? I remember looking at all the magazines and how can I get hold of one? And so happens, out of the blue, a guy called Donnie Bosman. He was a dentist. He worked in Nelspruit. Donnie, if you're out there, leave a comment. Say hi. Donnie, Donnie contacted me, and he had huge connections with Mercedes-Benz, and I had apparently done a favor for him, and unbeknownst to me, I can't remember at this time what that was, but he said to me, and we started chatting, and I said, I'd love a G-Wagen, but a price, there were 330,000 South African rands, which was, whoa, a lot at the time. And he said, I'll see what I can do for you. And a couple of months later, he came back and said, I can organize you an X-Demo model for 240,000. That's what it's going to cost. And Mercedes-Benz will sponsor 50,000 of it for you. So it's going to cost you 190,000. For a 3-month-old G-Wagen 290 GD, and I think it had 30,000 Ks on it, 40,000 kilometers on it. And I remember going to collect it, and I drove it. I was living in Cape Town, and so the 1,600 kilometers, I went to collect it, and I drove it home. It was so exciting, and I fell in love with the G-Wagen. It's built like a bridge in there. It's going to be quite a job to fit tanks, but I've been told they can do anything. This was the 290 GD with the specification, had proper Recaro seats in it. Standard with armrests. It had the same dashboard from the 1979 model. They hadn't changed it at all. It had a soft-ish ride because this was the Lux spec, not the 463 series, which is the top spec I call it the stupid spec, because the G-Wagen today that you find, which is a 463 specification, they've now even gone beyond that, they're not particularly good. There were some good versions of it, but they've become street cars. Like the Range Rover, they're just street cars. But underneath it, there's this chassis and everything. So the 461 series was the second generation of the military spec. And they are built. They're beautifully built. One of the drawbacks, for example, was the wheels with the mag rims. It came with 15-inch mag rims. They were made of butter. Not only time in my life, one of the very few times in my life where I actually damaged rims. They were so soft. They were not suited. So, but I didn't change them for steel rims. I kept them, but that was one of the weaknesses. The clearance breakover angle wasn't particularly good because I had the lower spring settings. I had fitted Bilstein shock absorbers in it, in the vehicle, but I loved it. We did some trips, some quite tough trips through the Kalahari. I remember, quite a few trips with it. And then after about 2 years, somebody came to me and he was desperate for a G-Wagen, and I was kind of thinking about the value in this car. It was the second-hand prices had become ridiculous, and he offered me the 365,000 rand for it, and I had put about 140,000, 180,000. I don't remember. It was something like that, kilometers on it. Still really nice condition, and I sold it. And at the time, I thought, yeah, same as I did when I sold my Land Rover Defender. I was building another house, we were building a bigger house, our family was growing. I thought I could take this and just throw it into the house. I have to do it. Then I was left with no vehicle at all. And so I had always, from the days that I drove the Land Cruiser Prado, had been looking at the Land Cruiser pickup line and thinking, what could you do with it? When somebody buys a 4x4 and walks into the showroom, when they take the vehicle away with them, they immediately start thinking about how they're going to change it to make it more palatable, because they're farm trucks. I had the choice of the 4.5 petrol motor or the 4.2 non-turbocharged, normally aspirated diesel 1HZ motor. And I decided that I would, if I could get a sponsorship or part sponsorship and have it converted from a pickup, because they were only available at that time in a single cab. This might sound bizarre, but the day I collected my pickup from the dealer, I took it to a place to be cut up. The 76 series had not been born, and the Troop carrier was not available in South Africa at that time. This was the only one. And so I purchased the diesel. Toyota now, we were very good friends, and I would get definitely preferential pricing via the marketing department. They wanted me to drive Toyotas. They didn't want me to drive Mercedes-Benzes or Land Rovers, so they were the only manufacturers actually to realize, yeah, we need to keep Andrew driving in our cars. How can we help him? And they didn't have budgets to give me cars, but they did have budgets to help me get a car. And we had a long, fantastic relationship in that regard, because they wanted me to drive their cars, and I wanted to drive their cars. I had the vehicle converted by a company in Krugersdorp called Miano and Son. They did conversions to Land Cruiser single cabs and made them double cabs, same wheelbase, same suspension, same engine and gearboxes. And in fact, it was so good that Toyota themselves visited Miano and Son when they, while they were developing their own 79 double cab, which you see today behind me. And they actually consulted with Miano's on that. That vehicle was the first time I had taken on a pickup. I put a pretty standard canopy on the back. I did not put a rooftop tent. I was still using ground tents, and there was one fundamental problem with that vehicle, and that was that it was an absolute dog. By the time we'd put a reasonable amount of weight in it, carrying safari gear, you know, a measure of a good four-wheel drive, in my eyes, is when you want to get in it and take it for a drive just to get your newspaper, for no other reason. You just want to take it for a drive. That vehicle was the first four-wheel drive that I had owned. I don't like driving it. It was good on a trip. We did a couple of trips with it. It was good on a trip. It was fantastic in the bush, but getting to the bush was so tiresome. We'd got Old Man Emu suspension, ARB bull bars on it. We had a water tank. We had various other bits and pieces. Nothing made up for, even nice seat covers, nothing made up for the fact that it was just so grossly underpowered. I've owned a number of Land Cruisers with that engine, and that was by far the worst. There's actually a big difference in them. I don't know, it's not necessarily weight, but that one was a dog. And I love the idea, the Land Cruiser idea. I was kind of hooked on Land Cruisers. I love the fact that you go to a trip in a Land Cruiser and just not even think about the car. Sweet. Sweet, sweet, sweet. One thing about traveling in these Land Cruisers, I have spent many years in many different vehicles, notably Land Rovers and Mercedes Geländewagens. Love them both, but there's a difference, and the significant difference is I never worry about my Toyotas. I just never worry about them. It's not that the others have let me down in any major way, but there's a feeling here. Just put the key in and they run. Take the key out and they stop. And they do that year upon year upon year upon year. I would always be aware of gearbox temperatures and all kinds of things. When I stepped out of Land Rovers, then in the G-Wagons, it was a newer vehicle, sure, but I was also aware of it, very aware of what was going on. I started driving Toyotas and I just forgot about it, actually. I became complacent. And because they're just so reliable, and they just are. So one does become complacent. Actually, probably pushing it a bit too far. I actually have to sometimes correct myself and say, hang on a minute, you haven't checked, you haven't checked the U-bolts. I have to correct myself because I am a bit complacent with that. But that's a bit of a Toyota thing. They are reliable, so you kind of become complacent. And then I bought a Land Cruiser 105. Now that, of course, is the Land Cruiser 100 series, but because it's the 05, it has the 80 series chassis. It was available in two engines. One was the 4.5 and the 1.2 normally aspirated diesel, same engines. I thought, I'm not making that mistake again. So I bought the 105 back to station wagons. Inherently, I prefer station wagons. I just do. I just prefer station wagons. And the 105, I remember collecting it and driving it down to, same thing, down from Joburg down to Cape Town, and looked at the fuel consumption and thought, yeah, it's not very good. I did everything I possibly could to improve its fuel consumption. And one of the things I did was I chipped it. I had the head worked, 4-valve per cylinder engine, all of the hulls ground and the inlet manifold ground and the whole head worked. So this thing really pushed a lot of power. And I did an exhaust, and this was to improve fuel consumption. Made no difference. Those of you who have seen some of my films will know the efforts that I went to try and get the fuel consumption better, and I did everything. I did everything you could possibly do to that engine to get it to use less fuel. I did some amazing trips in it, but every single one that I did, I remember once, 2006 through the Kalahari, we had to cut a whole leg short, even though I was carrying extra fuel. It just couldn't. We were getting at one stage 3 kilometers per litre in the desert. just 3 kilometers per litre. So eventually we had to, you know, and on 2 occasions it was, we can't carry enough fuel in this thing. We got to carry water and fuel. We got to trade one off. It was a fantastic vehicle. And the 105 chassis and the 105 body combination is remarkable in terms of the strength, the feel of the vehicle, the handling of the vehicle, the handling over rough tracks. Put a decent suspension in it. I remember my second one I'll get to now had a suspension system that I just had sussed on that vehicle. I'll get to it now because I actually later on bought another one. Because I didn't keep that for very long either. I think it was 1.5 years or so, and I sold it. It was so expensive to run, and I couldn't use it for the expeditions that I wanted to run. While I owned the Land Cruiser 105 4.5 and wasn't happy with it because of its consumption, I was offered a G-Wagen 290 GD, a NATO specification, from somebody living in Lesotho. And I went to have a look at this, went into Lesotho and had a look at it, and he was offering it to me for 200,000 Rand. And its market price, 400 at least. Trouble is, registered in Lesotho means that it was illegal to bring it into South Africa. And I thought, let me buy it and try it. And I tried it for 2 years to bring it into South Africa. I didn't do a lot of trips with it, but off-road. I did a lot of off-road driving in it. Some of the most difficult and challenging off-road driving I've ever done in my life in that NATO spec. The NATO spec had better clearance. 16-inch rims, narrow rims, steel rims. I remember it was so good on rough ground. I would go down to my mate's farm in Natal called Stony Ridge, and there was a 5-kilometer drive from the main road down to his farm. And I remember I would get ready, I would turn into the farm gates, and I would prop myself up on the seat and brace myself and just belt it down this road. It was a track, and the vehicle would just brilliant, indestructible. G-Wagons are like that, feel as if they've been honed out of one great big chunk of steel, and just one piece, not a whole lot of pieces bolted together. Remarkable. And I remember some of the off-road performance of that vehicle, remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But I couldn't get it registered. I couldn't get it registered in South Africa, and eventually they threatened, I actually had a letter saying, if you don't take that vehicle back to Lesotho, we will confiscate it and crush it. So I then took it back to Lesotho, sold it to a South African guy in Lesotho for 200,000, got what and he tried the same thing. And apparently he failed too, because somebody sent me a picture not long ago of it that spotted in somewhere in South Africa, still with its same Lesotho plates. He might go to Lesotho once a year and just get the registration stamped. I assume he does. So then, well, what do? Do I go diesel? So then they'd launched, and that would have been 2007. They launched the 76 series. It had the old dashboard, pre-airbag dashboard, and it had the 1HZ. And I thought, well, if I go the 1HZ, it's a much lighter vehicle, will I be okay? And that was the vehicle that I did my first solo trip through the Kalahari, 2008. I never liked the vehicle. I still had a family. The family was a bit cramped in the back. It wasn't big in the back. It wasn't nearly as big as my 105. Now the Land Cruiser, very old-fashioned, really. And I hated the steering wheel. There's another thing that I hated about the 79 double cab at that time. The steering wheel was, a farm truck. Steering wheel's got to be attractive. It has to be attractive. This was all vaulting, complete lack of any style of any kind, staring you in the face while you're driving this thing. As I said, pre-airbag, then they improved it and put, actually what they've got now is got a nice steering wheel. And again, I didn't like it. So I thought, hang on, if I buy a 105, and at that time I'd done a lot of research on turbocharging the 105, and I had learned that turbocharging the 105 just go ahead and turbocharge the 105 without any thought is a very dangerous proposition, because the pistons, top of the pistons are quite thin, you overboost it, and if you get high EGTs with an overboost, you blow a hole right through. And many people with 1HZs have suffered this fate. And I remember getting my 105, and there was a company in South Africa called Alpine Conversions, and they offered me a free turbocharger, free for publicity, and I said, no thank you. And you know, interestingly enough, those of you who know the show, my vehicle that I, in fact, it's near the end of this list, the Land Cruiser 105 diesel that I bought in South Africa last year, 2019, had been modified with that Alpine turbo, and it had blown the engine.
So these engines came into South Africa, and then they fitted turbos to a lot of these models done by Alpine. There's a lot of telltale signs you'll see, and it's always a worry when they've fitted a turbo to a motor that's non-standard.
So I thought, okay, well, I've done a lot of research, and I put in a small turbocharger with a mechanical wastegate that when you set it on a dynamometer, when the boost pressure goes above 6.65 bar, if I remember correctly, it will actually open the wastegate and spill excess boost. So it's giving you boost, it's giving you extra power. All you need is to get that extra power to get past trucks. That's all you need. It's still no good for towing. It'll overheat, but and an EGT gauge. Must have an EGT gauge. And so what happened was that every now and again, a hot day, long hot climb, beep, 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 warning, it's reached 600 degrees, 650 degrees, I think I seem to remember it was set at. You just tap off very slightly, temperature comes down, you're fine. You're looking after the engine. It's those boost pressures at high EGTs that blow the engine. So as long as you know what's going on as an operator, you can. I thought, I want that 105 body I'd had with that thirsty petrol engine, but I want with more power, but the economy of the diesel. Let me try it. And that vehicle was second only to the G-Wagons. Best four-wheel drive I've ever owned since. And then, you know, before that, the highlights of my four-wheel drive career, without question, Range Rover, Defender, my second G-Wagen, and my 105 diesel. At that time, now, Land Rover approached me, and out of the blue, Land Rover wouldn't speak to me. I was persona non grata. After my Land Rover Discovery 2 review, they did not want to do any business with me at all. A man by the name of Roland Reed was appointed their marketing director. And Roland walked in and contacted me soon after he took the job and said, Andrew, would you like to drive a Land Rover? We'd like you to drive the Land Rover. It wasn't quite as simple as that. I actually have done a story. But basically, to paraphrase, to speed it, long story short, he called me and said, we'd like to do something with you. I was so shocked that Land Rover had actually called me that I said, well, the next time I'm in Johannesburg, and went up there, sat with them. Meeting of people. Half of the people in the meeting I knew. Roland hadn't met him before. He said, Andrew, what would you do if we gave you a Land Rover Discovery 4? What would you do with it? I said, I'd take it on some trips. He said, yeah. I said, I would take it on Southern Africa's worst public track, Baboons Pass in Lesotho, to see if we could do it. And the story would be, this SUV, they claim it's so good off-road. How good off-road is it really? And he said to me, what happens if you fail? I said, I'm going to broadcast it. He said, if you fail, can I send my people up to prove that it can be done in the vehicle? I said, yes, and I'll come on that trip too, and I'll film it as well. He put out his hand and he said, Andrew, you've got a deal. I could see the people in the room staring up at him saying, no, no, no. He was the only one who had trust in his vehicle. And those of you who have seen the show, the videos on my my drive up Baboon's Path with a stock, absolutely stock LR4. It's remarkably good. And as an SUV that claims to be a real off-roader, yes, it is. Subject to the fact that it has very large rims, and we had challenges with not being able to let down the tires. It was too dangerous to let down the tires, etc., etc. It was fantastic. I then did a trip with it. I had it for, they promised it to me for 12 months, but they actually took it back from me after 11 months because Roland left the company. He was there for a short time. I don't even think he was there for more than 2 years in total. But anyway, he left, and then they said, no, we want the car back. I think I know why they took the car back. Because I did a trip through Zimbabwe, and I complained that a very simple fact that because of the, again, electronic suspension. Here is where my single biggest criticism of Land Rover Discovery 3 and 4 comes in. The road ahead of me is rough, sandy, but not so rough that I can't do 50 k's an hour, 60 k's an hour. You know, electronically controlled air suspension. So I'd like to press my suspension height to give myself just a little bit of extra clearance. Speed too high to raise suspension. This is why I can't stand the stuff. So now I must slow down. I'm doing 51. Corrugated tracks. The suspension now is working hard and doing its job extremely well. But the electronics is saying, I now need to lower the height at 50 kilometers an hour. But now these are corrugations, and these corrugations need about 58 kilometers an hour. Just so you can get the rhythm over a corrugation road, you get that, you know what it's like? And then start smoothing out. Now the car's starting to settle, and the road is rutted. And I keep hearing, boff, woof. Oh, I'm going to wreck. I'm in the middle of the bush. I'm going to wreck the car. Slow down. Up goes the air suspension. Now I've got clearance. Now I'm not going to hit anything. And I accelerate to 50. Slow down or vehicle will lower. I could easily do 55 on this road. As long as I do less than 50, I won't hit anything. So I'm going go, 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 go for the whole day. Okay, so around town, general purpose use, off-road use, fabulous car. Expedition use? No, it's no good. You can get modifications for... So the family loved it. Gwen adored that car. Practically speaking, drop-down tailgates, so much, the seating position, the ergonomics of that car. Gee, it's nice. It's far nicer. It was far nicer than anything made by any manufacturer for its task. Expedition use? Forget it. It's got electronic suspension. At about that time, I still owned my 105 diesel. Toyota launched that they were announced that they were going to launch the Troop carrier in South Africa, and I thought, very, very nice. Immediately contacted. Now, Roger had long gone. Now there was a guy called Ferdy de Vos, and he was running Toyota marketing at the time. Was certainly high up in Toyota marketing, and I contacted him and said, "Can we do a deal? Can I take one of your press vehicles from you?" And it was a bit to and froing, and it was a bit awkward. And eventually, it was, "We've got one for you, Andrew. Yes, you can. You can have it." At that time, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I'm going to do something major with it. We'll keep it for at least 3 years, and we're going to do quite a heavy conversion. So it can't be a sponsorship vehicle. You have to guarantee that you're going to give me the vehicle, or I buy it from you at market value after 3 years. I have to keep reminding myself that it's just a sunroof. Because I'm going to convert it. You're not going to be able to resell it as a standard vehicle. We're going to be too much work doing on it to convert it back to standard. And we came to an agreement, which was fantastic. And those of you who know that the one I spray painted green, it had the 1HZ. I put the same small turbocharger in it to give it a little bit of power, and I converted it in partnership with Alucab, the Alucab Hercules product, which was my concept. They designed it with the two of us, the three of us, four of us, five of us got together, and we came up with this product that they now sell as the Hercules product on troop carriers. And a good product it is too. Definitely one of Alucab's best products, in my opinion. And they've even tweaked it and improved it in a few ways since I got my prototype. And it's been, I think, very successful, I'm told, for them. And I loved that troop carrier. To me, it was the perfect two-person safari truck. It was good off-road. It was fun to drive. It gave you a sense of safari, just going down to get the newspaper. 2013, I left South Africa. Took the whole family, and we moved to England and left my troop carrier in South Africa. I still didn't own it. Toyota owned it. And eventually they actually passed it into my hands in 2015. So I had it on their books for a long time. 30 had left and other people had come in, and eventually they said, yes, it's time to settle this. And I did a trip to South Africa in 2015. And I went to collect the vehicle and actually pay the balance. I'd worked out what approximately it would be, and they called me in and they said, there are the keys. I said, and the balance? And he said, it's yours. It's yours. We love the work you've done. Thank you for all of your efforts and everything. It's yours. So I've moved off the road, found a flat spot. It's always a good idea in Lesotho, if you're just going to bush camp, wild camp, is to do it early. Don't wait to the last minute. Don't wait for the sun to go down, because most of Lesotho is very, very lumpy. Oh wow! And that was that really gave me a boost, that I had managed to. That gave me a car. All right. Car makers don't give people cars. Maybe if you're a soccer celebrity they would. So anyway, so that was really, really good. And then I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I knew I wasn't going to return to live in South Africa. So I managed in 15 to put it on a ship out of Durban Harbour, and it arrived in London docks. I remember collecting it from London docks. This vehicle's very, very long journey from Durban has finally come to an end, and I'm here at Tilbury docks collecting it. I made a whole film about that car. It's on the channel from its beginning to its, and I remember the thrill of driving it through England. This African Overland even had an Africa badge on the side of it, sticker on the side of it, African Overland, and drove it to my home. But actually at the time we were talking about moving to Australia, and I thought, well, how would the Australian market go for a 1HZ powered troop carrier? You can get them here, cheap. Older than that, mind you, but cheap. And I thought, it's, as much as I love it, if I could sell it, I could get a good price in the UK for it. I was allowed to bring it into the UK because of one factor. I once lived in England. I was born in England. So I was regarded as a returning resident. A returning resident can bring their car with them, and they just has to go through checks and roadworthy certificate specification checks and all that kind of thing, that it's legal on the road there, and you can bring in a vehicle. That was why I could take it to the UK. If I hadn't been a returning resident, no way, you cannot, it's no. But I knew that this was a possibility. So with this vehicle now, valuable vehicle in the UK, I sold it. Well, this is both a sad day and a glad day for me as I prepare my Land Cruiser 78 for sale. Sold it to a chap by the name of Dave Cox. He's an avid off-roader, loves exploring the English countryside, and has had a number of Land Cruisers before. And so this is his first Land Cruiser 70 series. And well, I think he got it for an absolute bargain. But in that case, I'm probably quite biased. But I'm not unhappy with the amount I got for it. I'm quite happy with the amount I got for it. And so I think it's going to a good home. I think he will use it properly and get an enormous amount out of it. And with the funds that I got from that vehicle could bring my family to Australia. And we arrived in Australia, and we lost a lot of money when Brexit, big chunk of the value of that car was lost overnight when Brexit voted yes to leave the EU, and the massive instant value drop in the pound sterling. But it wasn't big enough to thwart our plans, and so we came to Australia in the end last month of November 2016. We came to Australia, and December I ordered my troop carrier. So now I have to say goodbye to a 1HZ engine. I won't be getting another 1HZ. This is the fourth one I've had. I'm getting a V8, the D4D turbo diesel. It's a 4.5 litre turbo diesel V8 in a Land Cruiser 78, which I am purchasing in Australia and building to a similar specification to this. And in June 2017 did my first Australian epic, which was in my troop carrier, which was even better than it was fantastic. Same Hercules rooftop tent by Alucab, the interior by Quick Pitch. The awning had an Alucab awning on it, had a Snowmaster fridge in it, had guys at Global Sat in Ipswich in Queensland did the electrics for me. It was a great collaboration, and culminating in Paul Marsh coming over to Australia and driving the Canning Stock route with me.
The other part of the build that was great fun was showing it to Paul for the first time.
Hey, this has to be the best truck you've built. Yeah, I'm so excited about this trip. You know, this is actually a big tick box.
Brilliant. It was one of the highlights of my overlanding career was Canning Stock. Without question, there are a number of highlights. I should do a story time about my highlights of my overlanding career. Canning Stock was without question one of those highlights.
And in September 2019, the Land Cruiser 105 4.2 diesel, the bringing back to life of a 20-year-old Land Cruiser in Africa. But due to COVID-19, a vehicle that I may never get the chance to use in action.
And what you see behind me is by far the most elaborate, I was going to say expensive, but actually not really, because I don't get the vehicles. Toyota, I buy vehicles from Toyota. I pay the retail price. I have a dealer that gives me nice discounts, and that's where my relationship with Toyota starts and ends. But the relationship I've had with guys like Quick Pitch and Norweld and the Tommy camper on the back and Snowmaster fridges, and I've been using their fridges since they started making fridges. And their attitude is, Andrew, you want a fridge? Phone me, I'll send you a fridge. You know, it's that kind of attitude and they're good. They're good. They really are good. And I thought for a moment I wasn't going to be able to fit one in this camper, but I managed to get one in there. And so all of the ARB with the troop carrier sponsored all the suspension. I chose their springs, and I'd used in my 105, and I was going to mention this, my 105 diesel had Old Man Emu springs and Coney Raid shocks. What a combination. Boy, that fantastic. I first test drove them in a Prado with the same setup, and the ride was outstanding, and with a 105. Instead of going Raid on the troop carrier, I went BP51s. And that with the Old Man Emu, outstanding. The ride was fantastic. All kinds of terrain. Marvelous. This now is a Terrain Tamer suspension system, a Terrain Tamer Pro Shocks. The ride is really good. I'm very, very happy with it. There are some, because this is now my first trip in this vehicle, things I want to, no major changes to the vehicle at all. I will be chipping it. More about that later, and the reason why I want to chip it. The camper needs work. This is the first camper that I developed. I didn't buy a completed camper. I bought a camper which was not quite an empty shell, but I wanted to adapt it for my own use, and I got a lot right and I got a few things wrong. That's going to be phase 2 of this. And so now this is, if I look at my list, my 14th four-wheel drive, and it's my Land Cruiser wise, excluding my sponsored Land Cruiser, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th. This is my 8th Land Cruiser. What's my next vehicle going to be? I know, maybe an Ineos Grenadier. I don't know. Do I feel like a change from Land Cruisers? Mercedes G-Wagen. Still love them to bits. Don't have any other aspiring ideas at this moment. I hope you've enjoyed my story time. It's been a long one, and if you're still with me, thank you for watching. See you next time.